as this pope is trying to determine who he is going to be and where his focus is going to be, I think he is a realist in recognizing that AI is not going anywhere, but that we do need to get away from this idea of AI exceptionalism, this idea that AI is this inevitable thing that
Mhm,
must continue the way it
mhm.
is, and that anybody who gets in the way of that mission is problematic.
Hey there, fellow nerds. Welcome back to another episode of The Present Illness, the podcast where two physicians try to make sense of a world that is definitely febrile and also underdiagnosed. I'm Arghavan Salles, a surgeon scientist and your friendly neighborhood doom scroller in residence.
And I'm Alyssa Burgart, an anesthesiologist and bioethicist who tracks news and health law like their EKGs, full of spikes and surprises. The Present Illness is where we dig into public health, politics, culture, and ethics with a scalpel in one hand and a meme in the other. As a note to our listeners, we often talk about tough topics that are intense, can be activating, and can be a lot.
We wanted to give a big thank you to everyone who's listening and some extra love to our subscribers or those who follow us on any of the various platforms, with a special warm welcome to anyone who is just stumbling in from, any of the many things happening, the Ebola epidemic that's happening in Africa and the U.S.'s unwillingness to allow any U.S. citizens or green card holders who may have been exposed to come back to the United States. Instead, they should go to Kenya. Who knows why? um, RFK Jr.'s adventures, I should say, with snakes that have been getting a lot of airtime in the last few days. The
Is he into
building,
snakes?
he is into wrangling snakes, which seems really wise. So there's a couple different videos of him nabbing snakes for who knows what reason. Um, yeah.
I'm going to be honest, I didn't need to know that.
Yeah, I didn't need to see videos. Honestly, one of them was at apparently Dr. Oz's house. And then there's another one that popped up that was at his home with, but outside, by the way, not like inside the house where like obviously you have to do something, but these were outside. And so he's like gotten this. The one with Cheryl Hines is actually the more disturbing one because he uses this like thing to kind of pin down the snake and then grabs it by its head. I don't know if that's what it's called. And he's like, "Oh, there's its fangs. I don't really want to touch the." I mean, it's weird. Like, what are you doing grabbing a rattlesnake in any way, much less like by its head? What are you anyway? So that was that. We also have the building of the UFC arena on the lawn of the White House, which
Okay,
is a spectacle. Yeah.
so I saw somebody alluding to this, and I thought it was a metaphor. I thought it was a metaphor that there was that the White House was like a UFC fighting ring. And then I thought, I should check. And then I saw the images of
Mhm,
those like giant,
mhm,
like that whole stage they built, and
mhm.
I was not prepared for that to be real.
Yeah, it is. And they said it last year. They said that they were going to have this UFC fight for, I believe it's for Donald Trump's birthday. Um, and they're really doing it. So, even if you thought it was a joke last year, you were wrong. It's happening. And then the last thing I wanted to add in this mix is yesterday, Stephen Miller made a comment about James Tallarico, who is a candidate for office in Texas, where Stephen Miller said something. I don't have the exact words in front of me, but basically, I'm saying that James Tallarico is transgender. And the Democrats, like the official Democrat account, replied something like "Shut up, you ugly fuck." I think that's what it was. Yeah, which has gotten a lot of attention with people on the left clutching their pearls, going, "What? This is going to instigate political violence." Never mind all the things that they're constantly saying about people. Yeah, it was exactly that. Shut up, you ugly fuck. Um, and then Katie Miller went on, I believe it was on Fox News, talking about the person who was behind that account, who's looks like a lovely 30-year-old woman. But Katie Miller was then attacking this person that, she's a single woman who's a liberal, crazy cat lady, that kind of thing. Um, Even though obviously she knows nothing about this person. And also she is married to someone who I don't like to talk about people's appearances, but both inside and out, he's pretty darn ugly. Anyway, those are just some of the things. happening out there?
So, so you know what I thought you were going to say about James Tallarico, which, like, certainly if James is transgender, wonderful, be whoever you're going to be. Um, but what I thought you were going to say is there were accusations earlier this week that he was a vegan.
Oh,
That
yeah, there's
apparently
that too.
he felt he had to vigorously defend his love of meat and barbecue, which I thought was really funny. I
I
just
know
thought,
that that was the worst thing they could say about him was that maybe he didn't like meat, although he does apparently like meat, but that was, like, the best they could come up with, as a way to slander this man was to call him a vegan. But then, of course, Stephen Miller came up with something else, which is also not an insult, obviously, but is treated like one by the
yeah.
people who are behind all this, anti-trans rhetoric.
That was a lot to stumble in from, and I know that I personally have been feeling, it's so disorienting. There's just and
Mhm,
I think that's, it's the point for us to all
mhm.
be disoriented by the news, and, it's it's something.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
so great to be a US citizen at this point in time. Only good things happening.
well, folks, listen, we are glad you're here. We're happy to be back from my time away in particular. Um, we thought that today we would talk about, the big news this week is Pope Leo and
Yeah,
his new encyclical, his first encyclical
correct.
since becoming Pope. And for those of you who haven't heard of it yet, it's called Magnifica Humanitas, so magnificent humans, and it's all about AI. And so, very interesting that he chose for his very first encyclical to be about this transformative and often nefarious technology that we're all just living through this big transition right now. Um, but one of the things I thought was interesting is so when Pope Leo chose his name, the popes generally choose their name in reference to a previous pope. There's a lot of excitement as a pope has been selected by the College of Cardinals, but before they
Mhm,
announce what their name will be. And when he selected the name Leo, this was really seen as that Pope Leo would be similar to Pope Leo the 13th, who was a pope during the Industrial Revolution and really launched Catholic social teaching around protection of workers. Uh, it's a little weird to talk about Catholicism as trying to be anti-capitalist because I think there's a lot of tension
mhm,
for anybody who knows about the history of the Catholic Church and its role in specifically colonialism
mhm,
and
mhm,
really pushing vast collection of wealth by stealing from other people. Um, but the Pope Leo the 13th had a very powerful encyclical that was about protecting workers called Rerum Novarum, which is on new things. And so it is also a tradition that when a pope wants to release a new encyclical, they will oftentimes do it on the anniversary of
mhm,
another encyclical in which it's related to. So Magnifica Humanitas was released on the 135th anniversary to the day of Novarum. Um, so clearly a very purposeful choice to
mhm,
release it on that day in particular and in direct reference to the previous Pope Leo. So I think this also brings out that this Pope is going to continue to be a champion for workers, a champion for the poor, which is how he very much lived his life before becoming Pope.
mhm.
Um, I went through and watched the entire there was a
There was a
AP had
promo
recorded.
video.
Well, there's a promo video which we can put a link in the show notes. That actually ends with saying break the chains of digital slavery.
Mm.
But the piece that I actually watched there was an hour and a half, essentially, I'm going to call it a launch party.
Oh,
It was basically a sort of media, it sort of looked like a med school sized classroom where the Pope sits at a dais in the front with a number of scholars and other religious leaders. And it was the like kind of formal launching
mhm, mhm.
of this encyclical, this is not like typical. It isn't like all encyclicals get this kind of a launch party, if you will.
Yeah.
And so there were several people that spoke at it. A lot of it was in Italian, and I don't speak Italian, so I couldn't follow that. But there were four different people who actually spoke in English, and one of them was Anna Roland, who is a scholar of social Catholic ethics from Durham University in the
Mm.
UK. And so she gave remarks ahead of the Pope talking about the importance of Catholic social teaching and the importance of Catholic social teaching in relation to AI. Um, Probably one of the most surprising things was that Christopher Olaf, who is the co-founder of
Anthropic?
Anthro I was gonna say Anthropocene, which is that's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek, the AI is bringing the Anthropocene, but, that Christopher Olah, the co-founder of Anthropic, was there and also gave remarks. Um, it's an interesting choice. He was
Mhm.
invited by the Vatican to participate in that, I think in part because Anthropic had refused, at least as of several weeks ago, had refused to provide their data and training models to the US government for acts of war. Since then, they have made a contract with the NSA, so I'm not really sure what that means in that context. We'll have to see. I'm not, I don't hold my breath that Anthropic is going to actually be some human centered
Yeah.
business, but I think it was important that they were willing to be part of that conversation and accepted that opportunity to go to the Vatican and be part of this. Um, One of the things that he said was some might believe that matters of AI are best handled by computer scientists like myself. They are mistaken. And so there at least was an open, really attestation that engineers are not the only people who should be making these choices, and that we do
Mhm.
need to have more holistic approaches
Mhm.
to AI.
I just wanna say before we get too much further into this conversation, in case
Sure.
folks haven't, been following, that the my impression from the excerpts that I've seen from the encyclical is that it's very anti-AI. I mean, the Pope says himself that we need to disarm AI.
I
Um, Go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually don't think that it's at all in opposition to AI. I think it's in opposition to negative uses of AI. But it's very much not saying destroy AI. It's saying we need to reassess how AI is being used and not allow for AI to be used to make the lives of human beings worse.
Well,
Um,
and, um, but it's more than that because he's talking about,
it's a lot more than that for
well,
sure.
obviously, it's like
Yeah, yeah,
42,000 words, so yeah, I'm not you can't distill it down into one sentence, but, the excerpts that I've seen are a lot about, I'm just looking through a few of them, but they're a lot about centering human dignity,
yeah.
um, and so I think there's certainly parts of it where it reads this again, these sections read to be pretty anti, in my view, because there's things like he brings up Hannah Arendt's writing
Hmm.
about totalitarian regimes and says, the ideal subjects of such regimes are not so much those who are ideologically convinced, but rather people for whom, this is a quote, people for whom the distinction between fact and fiction, in other words, the reality of experience, and the distinction between true and false, in other words, the standards of thought, no longer exists, which I thought was him getting at this kind of loss of truth and fact that we have going on even before this wave of AI, but also that when you're relying on AI generated output, which we know is not reliable, then you no longer really have a strong sense of what's true and what's not true. And so that doesn't go against what you were saying about like the focus being on how we use this technology. But he also says um, that reducing men and women to data and packages is problematic. He says this reality deeply challenges the moral conscience of our time. It is not enough to invoke efficiency or to celebrate the benefits of innovation if they are built on a chain of exploitation that remains deliberately hidden. If technology promises emancipation yet produces new forms of global subordination, it stands in contradiction to the fundamental principle of human dignity.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's one of the things that Catholic social teaching really focuses on human dignity, and I think that's in obviously in I've left the church. Like I've said this before, I was raised Catholic. I've read many encyclicals. I desperately tried to stay Catholic when I was younger, and I just couldn't do it because of all of the things about the Catholic Church's behavior that are
Mhm.
counter to what they claim the teachings are,
Right.
such as the treatment of course, children who were sexually abused within the church and the church that covered it up. So I say this pope is clearly grounded in a liberation theology framework. And I think that the social teachings, in terms of defending the poor and supporting the rights of workers, is something that Catholic social teaching has really leaned
Mm,
into in the past. You know, I personally feel that we see this much more strongly in Central and South America in the practice of Catholicism, which is where this pope spent the majority of his time before becoming pope. Um, I think this idea of a liberatory liberation theology framework is something that many US Catholics have not really been exposed to. So, I think that the reason that I push back on this idea that it is
mhm,
anti-AI is that I think that this encyclical is saying the current trajectory that the use of this technology is on, that is capitalist framed, that
mhm,
is suppressing workers' rights, hiding the negative aspects of it, impacts on the environment, etc.
mhm,
That is not inevitable, and that is something that is not only within human control, but that it is our responsibility as human beings to demand that these technologies not be used in this way.
mhm,
I think that this pope has been very careful in the wording of this encyclical to not come across as anti progress.
mhm.
I mean, listen, the Catholic Church was not into, Galileo. They don't have the greatest track record on a lot of social issues and scientific issues. And so I think that as this pope is trying to determine who he is going to be and where his focus is going to be, I think he is a realist in recognizing that AI is not going anywhere, but that we do need to get away from this idea of AI exceptionalism, this idea that AI is this inevitable thing that
Mhm,
must continue the way it is,
mhm.
and that anybody who gets in the way of that mission is problematic. He's trying to provide social boundaries around it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe a better way to put it is from than what I said earlier is that it's a very strong criticism, I feel,
Oh,
of
yeah.
what's currently happening. As you said, what's currently happening, like how these things are being rolled out. We saw just recently the thousands of people laid off at Meta. There was that leaked audio of Mark Zuckerberg basically talking about how they're now, in case folks hadn't heard, they now monitor every keystroke of every employee. And the way he explained it to the employees was that this is because they have such smart employees and they have such a large number of smart employees that this is the way to build the most competitive AI is to train their AI off of the behaviors of these very smart people. What he left unsaid was that he was doing that so he could replace these people with AI. It was a particularly vile set of statements that he made. And I mean, not that he's not made other vile statements, but it was really disturbing, even as someone who's never worked at Meta, never will work at Meta, but it was disturbing to listen to. And so, like, another section here from the encyclical that speaks a little bit to this is he says, if the human being is treated as something to be perfected or surpassed, it becomes easier to accept that some lives are less useful, less desirable, or less worthy. In the name of progress, necessary sacrifices may begin to be justified, placing the burden on the most vulnerable. And then he goes on and says, it is one thing to integrate technology within a human centered relational vision. It is quite another to be guided by an outlook that devalues human limits and promises a purely technical form of salvation, which is what I think a lot of these companies currently are doing. They're trying to sell this message that this AI is going to magically make everything better, even though its very existence is the exploitation of humanity and all the
Well,
work that we have done.
yeah. And, having lived here on and off in the Silicon Valley for a very long time, people who work at startups, people who work at these big companies, they always say they're going to change the world. And it's always this like
Mhm,
wonderful utopian vision of a future. And, obviously, time and time again, we see that that is not the case.
mhm.
Um, so the other people I wanted to mention
Yes,
who
sorry. I
spoke, no,
derailed
no,
you.
no,
Yeah,
no, no,
please.
no, not at all. Oh, and I wanted the other you mentioned Hannah Arendt, and there's a bunch of references in this piece that which is not typical. I would say there's a bunch of sort of references to not only Hannah Arendt, who wrote specifically about the banality of evil in response to World War II. There
Mhm.
was reference to Viktor Frankl, who is somebody who survived the Nazi concentration camps. There was reference. There's a Gandalf
Yeah.
reference from J.R.R. Tolkien, who is a Catholic writer. Pablo Picasso is mentioned. Beethoven, Maria Montessori, who started the Montessori educational programs. So lots of references to material sort of outside of the
Mhm,
church that I think was very interesting and particular used in a particularly effective way. And I think it also shows that, certainly Leo didn't write this all by himself. Clearly, this is, I'm sure, a whole staff of people who helped to articulate these messages. So the other people who spoke at this session, so I mentioned Professor Anna Rowland from Durham University, and then Professor, and I apologize because I'm not certain how to pronounce her name, but her name's Leo Katie or Leo Kadi Lushombo. And she's actually here in the Bay Area. She's a professor of theological ethics at Santa Clara University, which is not too far from here. So she does a bunch of work on Christian social talk, specifically Catholic social teaching, economic globalization. She herself is from Africa. I believe she's from the Congo. And so on this dais, I think to have two prominent women scholars speaking on this issue. They were both part of, my understanding is they were both part of the group that was part of the advisory
mm,
program to like prepare for this encyclical. And then Cardinal Michael Serzi is a cardinal from here in the United States who also spoke. So I'll put a link to the full thing for folks who, if you really want to listen to it all, you can.
mhm,
The Pope actually also, I think this is important. So the Pope is multilingual. The Pope chose to give his remarks about AI in English.
mm,
And I think that that is in particular to make sure that this is as accessible as possible to people in America who are the primary drivers of this technology at this time. And
mhm,
so, now, versus, for example, when he gave his address when he became Pope, he did that in Spanish and he did
mm,
that in Italian. And so that was seen, for example, as um, a particular way of who it is that he's trying to speak to and
mhm,
using language in a way that sends an additional message.
mm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's been if anyone for folks who've been online, you've probably seen a lot of chatter about this encyclical, and I think in part because people are so frustrated. A lot of people are really frustrated with what's happening with these tech companies, right where we live, in particular. And I know you were traveling, but I don't know if you saw these videos of commencement speakers like Eric Schmidt, who was the
Yes.
previous CEO of Google, and then this other woman who is lesser known, who was giving a speech at University of Central Florida, and both of them were, and there's a third person whose name I don't recall at all, but there's three different speeches I've seen that are commencement speeches where they are touting AI and it's the future, and kind of you got to get on board messages that were very poorly received, with loud boos from the audience, in each of these cases because of, I mean, so many things. And we haven't done an episode breaking down like the environmental impact and the we've kind of alluded to, we haven't really talked about the ways that it gives out false information, um, and you can tell that when you search, if you use one of these things to search on something you actually know quite a lot about, it becomes very easy to see how inaccurate the information is. And the dangerous thing is that people obviously aren't using it to learn about something they already know a lot about. They're using it to learn about things they don't know as much about, so they can't tell what is true and what is false. Anyway, so
Well,
there's
and
all these concerns that make it very unpopular. We've got the data centers that are being fought at almost every turn
Mhm.
now because of the impact on
I mean,
the environmental pollution, the
data
water
centers
pressure, utilities, cost rising, etcetera.
I think data centers are the new private prisons. These are the ways that you can take anyway. I
Yeah. I mean, yes, I was saying all that just to say that I think part of the reason this has gotten so much attention, even though, there are a lot of people, like, I'm obviously not, well, maybe not obviously, but I'm not Catholic, never been part of any sort of organized religion. But I really have seen a lot of different excerpts and comments about what is said in this piece of writing, because I think a lot of people were looking for a leader who's not going to keep pushing the same message that we're
Mhm.
getting fed all the time right now, which is, as you were saying, that AI is inevitable. It is the future. You have to get on board. And this is the first time we've seen someone that prominent
Mhm.
say, "Mm, not really necessarily on board with that. Like, there's a lot of
Yeah.
concerns, and we need to be centering humans, not centering this technology." And I think there was just this big gap,
Mhm.
and people were looking for that, and that's why there's been such a response.
Well, and I think it's also important to situate this for folks who aren't aware with, Google, when they started their AI development program, they had ethicists. There was a period of time about 10 years ago where a number of the tech corporations they specifically had ethics teams to really try to help them think through the downstream effects of some of these technologies to try to, I think, that, from a position where they thought that would be information that they would desire. And then when they did not like what was
Mhm,
coming out, they
mhm.
fired all of those people. And
Yep.
this happened across the industry. Temnit Gebru was obviously the
Yes.
most famous person to, and thankfully she has, continued to do her work speaking out against that. Um, but as a I agree with you that this there have been many people talking about AI ethics, but it's people like me, right? Like we're
Mhm,
like little nobodies in academic centers. Even if you're at a high profile academic center, we certainly don't have the profile of someone like the Pope, who's
mhm,
really coming out to say, to the over 1 billion Catholics in the world, here's your guiding principles for how you can think about this technology and how we as a society need to protect each other. And what is it that we owe each other as
mhm.
human beings in order to, as you said, not to prioritize, these sacrifices, quote unquote, in the name of progress.
Yeah,
Um,
and this comes also at a time when I think we are starting to see a shift, and maybe this will facilitate that shift happening more quickly in the conversation around AI. In that, Starbucks recently said they're going to stop using generative AI for monitoring its uh, its stock of various items. Like, it was using that in some way, and it was inaccurate, shocking. So they're going to stop using that. Microsoft has said they're going to stop leasing cloud licenses because it really was just too expensive to maintain for what they were getting out of it. So they're shifting their own employees to Copilot, which um, is an interesting choice. Anyway, and then in the meantime, Uber COO has just said in the last few days that they are not really seeing the return in terms of productivity based on how much they're having to spend for these tokens. So
well,
it you
because
know
it's also like, this is what's so dumb is like, I have played around with a bunch of these AI tools because I really have to better understand in the context of healthcare what is being done with these, how do they work, how are patients using them, how are clinicians using them, and like the amount of work required to get some of these things to give you what you think you can get. Like I can do that with my own brain much more
Mhm,
efficiently.
mhm.
On
Ronnie
a
Chieng
handful of my a handful of M&Ms, I can run this bad girl up here.
exactly right, and Ronnie Chieng, who's on The Daily Show, he's a comedian, he just did
That's
a
my joy this week.
oh, that's your okay, I won't say it,
Don't steal my joy.
okay, okay.
Okay, because when
I'll
you were well, I'll tell all of you my joy this week. I'm just gonna give you a little preview. It's all of the people who did commencement speeches that were in opposition to the ones
okay,
that
alright, well,
Arghavan just talked about.
I will stop right there then, but, people have been predicting that there's gonna be a bubble that's going to burst with
Mhm.
AI because there's so much money that's been poured into this product, if you wanna call it that, that doesn't really deliver. And so I'm very curious to see where it's going to go. But we also have, I mean, there's just been there were multiple studies showing that, for example, when students are trying to learn, that if they learn using a generative AI system versus just Googling things and reading on their own, they don't learn as much. They might perform okay on a task where they have access to that tool, but then when they don't have access to that tool, they're not able to perform. There was a study in one of the Lancet journals on colonoscopy and gastroenterologists, and when they use an AI assistant to help them identify adenomas. When that assistant was taken away, their adenoma detection rate, which is their, in case there's non-medical folks listening, their ability to find abnormalities in the colon, that was lower after they took the AI away than even it was before they had the AI to begin with. So that's called
Yeah.
de-skilling. So there's just lots
Hmm.
of things that we see that are negative consequences in addition to the environmental, and ethical concerns. It doesn't seem like it's really delivering in the ways that these companies have told us they would. And as more of the content that's available in the world becomes AI generated, it now starts to feed on itself, and it's very limited in its capacity because it cannot think, at least as of
Because it
now,
cannot create an
cannot create.
independent and unique thought.
No, it has no creativity. Um,
Um,
and the thing is that it does that it's really dangerous is gives people the sense that they are learning and that
mhm.
they are gaining expertise, even though they're not. Once that information is taken away, they're not retaining. I saw I think it was a
It's
professor,
I
might have
wanna
been a
just say, like, it's not
yeah,
an educational shortcut, it's an educational short circuit.
absolutely, absolutely. And so there's a professor I saw who online had said that they are now requiring handwritten
Mhm.
essays because they're like, even if all you do is copy from your chat GPT, at least if you're copying it by hand, maybe you'll remember something. Maybe you'll get something out of it rather than copying and pasting into a Word document. Um, anyway, that's a whole nother topic of AI in educational settings and how it's being used. UC was it UC Berkeley's law school? I think that put out a statement. I will fact check myself in the show notes. Said they put out a statement they're no longer allowing any AI to be used in any of their coursework. Anyway, it's obviously one of the biggest topics of the day. I'm sure we'll revisit this at
Well,
another time.
I think that's why the timing of this encyclical is really important. I think this document, um, listen, there's already accusations that this document was made with AI.
Mhm.
We can talk in the future about plagiarism checkers and the fact
Yeah,
that those will sometimes say something's plagiarized or say something's generated by AI
yeah,
but we know that those are unreliable as well.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so I think these are all interesting things that are going to come out of here. I also think that it's, as somebody who no longer looks to the Catholic Church in general for moral clarity, I still find, as a bioethicist, like I find Catholic moral teachings to be an interesting way to inform myself to be able to think more deeply about, well, if I don't agree with this particular statement, why and under what circumstances would I accept this particular approach?
Mhm.
Certainly this is a document written for Catholics, but it's also written with an eye for the rest of the world. And so I do think it's interesting. I think that we're going to see a lot more religious leaders and moral leaders feel empowered to bring their own perspective to these. So I'll be kind of looking out for those as well. And, I'm curious to see how this sparks additional conversation. Um, we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm very curious as well. And I do want to just say, you alluded to this earlier, but I do want to just say, because it's come up in my comment sections, that our discussion here today is not an endorsement in any way of the Catholic Church or even this
Oh,
Pope. We're just talking about this very specific document and how it relates to a very current issue, which is the use of generative AI. I think you and I are both well aware of the horrific things that the church has done, and we're not suggesting anything like those don't matter or anything. Like, I'm just saying that because I've gotten a lot of comments from people being like, why are we whitewashing the harms of the church? Not. We're
well,
not. We're not.
but this is something that I have to live in tension with, and again, like as a former Catholic, like, I left the church after a great deal of discernment. Like, I there was a lot of things about the church that were really important to my life, really important to my family, and in the end, I just decided that that was simply I could not live
Mhm.
with the being part of an organization that couldn't stand up for kids the way that they needed to and has continued to marginalize, and repress the role of women. It's
Mhm.
interesting seeing how, now, I am, again, not saying that I think the church is doing a great job, but I did notice that the Pope did include a number, like I said, of female scholars on
Mhm.
this, in this process, which is not something that we also typically see. So again, I'm not looking. I don't think that people should expect for this Pope to be some revolutionary force.
Mhm.
um, I do not it is clear to me already that this pope is not going to right all the wrongs of the past. The
Mhm.
pope just I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, a group of German bishops, really they wrote to the pope to say, "We would like you to endorse us being able to give blessings to same-sex couples," and, the pope denied that request.
Mm.
And, I just listened, to a it wasn't an interview. He was like talking to a group of journalists, and one of them asked him about that, and I thought his response was very on brand, if you will, for
Mm.
a church that remains unfortunately fixed in its interpersonal ethics. So like the Catholic Church really has like kind of three kind of branches of teaching, and one of those is like, what are the decisions and the thoughts that I have for myself? What is the discernment I do for myself? They have a lot of interpersonal ethics. So if you think about relationships, the ways, other things like that, especially in relation to interpersonal decision making. I think that's an area where the church continues to be just way out of alignment
Mm.
with, frankly, the human dignity
Mhm.
of
Mhm.
many people who either are or would have liked to have remained part of the church. So, versus the social teachings, for example, I find that their social and interpersonal teachings are oftentimes too deeply in conflict, uh,
Mm.
for me to. I just don't think that they make sense.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I'm not, obviously there's a lot of people who have left the church for similar reasons. So, um, you will never hear me open-throatedly endorsing the Catholic Church.
All right.
But living in that tension,
Mm.
the tension of the fact that like you can have this organization that has many, many problems, that is absolutely must be reproached on a number of levels, and can still find value in things like this encyclical, if anything, as a source of dialogue and as a
Mhm.
source of, deep reflection on what are our values as human beings.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Okay, with that, we're going to change to a very different topic,
I can't
um,
wait.
because I want to talk about Ashley St. Clair, who I think is the most fascinating person on the internet right now. And people may disagree, but I will push back because I really feel very. I spent a lot of time on the internet, and she is the most
Okay.
interesting person around.
Well,
So,
so I want to say before you
mhm.
get started, so you texted me and you said, "Do you want to talk about the encyclical and maybe Ashley St. Clair?" And I was like, "Well, I want to talk about the encyclical because I do not know who this person is."
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you. So, Ashley is a young woman. I believe she's 27 years old. So that's really,
Okay.
really important to remember for this whole conversation. She starts most of her videos. So she's been doing a lot on TikTok. That's where I'm seeing her. She starts most of her videos with acknowledging that she was a MAGA influencer for almost 10 years, and
So since she was a
also
teenager.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah, so she talks about well, I wanna tell you her whole story, but the basic premise is she was a MAGA influencer for a long time. She's no longer doing that. And she, I don't believe in defining women by the men in their lives, but one notable thing about her is that she did have a child with Elon Musk. So, that's probably what she's most known for, I'm sure much to her chagrin. Now, what's happened is
God, what a guy to have to co-parent with, huh?
yeah, I'm not sure there's any co-parenting going on, to be honest, but the reason I think she's so fascinating is that she is doing something that people don't really do. she is talking about what she has seen and experienced with some of the most powerful people in the world. And she is just coming right out and saying it. Like I have a whole, I want to tell you her whole story, but just some highlights. Like she had a video that got a lot of attention last week where she talks about Elon's role in the 2024 election. Um, in and alludes to some of the same things and the same suspicions that people have had about potential election interference or fraud. And she's just saying that. I mean, and not just saying, she has her text messages. She has everything she's saying is backed up by documentation.
Mhm.
Um, and she's revealing, for example, how the MAGA influencers, how the whole machine kind of runs, how they coordinate their messaging, who's paying them for their messaging. I mean, again, things that usually we don't hear about because it is
Mhm.
really not in her interest or in the interest of her safety or the safety of her children to be talking about all this. But she feels, well, people can have different ideas and interpretations, but what she says is that she just feels very bad about the harm that she caused when she was part of this movement. And she wants people to know what is happening and how it's all working. So,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, there are people who think it's all a show and she's still secretly working with MAGA. Um, I don't personally
Doing
feel
what?
that way. Yeah, I've watched a lot of her videos, probably too many. It's kind of embarrassing, but I just find it really fascinating. So here's the basic story because a lot of times people are asking, but why? Like, why did you leave? What made you change your perspective? And
Sure.
so here's her basic story. She was, as you point out, she was a young woman. She had gone to college and she kind of pretty quickly fell into the TP Turning Point USA, who we've talked about before. She fell into that circle. And there was an event on campus very early on that like got her attention. And she just kind of, I mean, just being honest, I'm not making excuses for her, but it's like she kind of just fell into that group like we all do. We all just fall into different groups and this was the one that she ended up in. And she thought the people were nerdy and interesting, and she was one of the only women, which made for an interesting mix of, how she related to these folks. But she felt special, right? Because she was so unique relatively in that group. And, as a young, insecure person, that can be validating. Um, Anyway, again, not making excuses for her, but this is how she describes it, that she kind of fell into this group and then just leaned hard into it. And she was posting on Twitter. And eventually what ends up happening is she dates this guy. I guess his name is DC Drano, if anybody follows. I had never heard of him, but right wing MAGA influencer who, when she was 20, convinced her to drop out of college and move to Florida with him. So she did. And she had been homeschooled. She mentions this and it helps people understand, I think, a little bit. So she had been homeschooled in high school and lived in a very small town. Then she goes to
Mhm.
University of Colorado. She's there for like 2 years. At age 20, she leaves to move in with DC Drano. His name's Rogan. Um, and
I'm sorry. Did you just say DC Drano?
that's his like username, I guess.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah. It's a very online, like her, because she was an influencer, like
Sure.
everything
Sure.
revolves around like Twitter handles and Twitter chats
Hmm.
and, a lot of that. Anyway, so she has this relationship with this guy. It doesn't last too very long, but he's the reason she left school. And then now she's left school and she's in these influencer circles. And that's how she's getting both engagement and friendships and money. Like that's all she really has at that point. And so she gets very involved in like, she calls them the women of Mar-a-Lago. And like trips to Mar-a-Lago were like really important at that time. Yeah, it's just a fascinating look at like what's the social side of these people who we don't see that side of them. We see the bigoted things they post, right? But we don't really see like what are they doing with their time and how are they relating to each other. So somewhere along the way, Elon starts following her on Twitter after he has bought the platform. And so that gets her a lot more social capital because not only is he following her, he's like interacting with a lot of her posts. So it's very public. Yeah, I know.
Also, like,
It's
and how old
it's
is
gross.
he at this
It's
point?
gross.
I
Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah. He's like 30 years ish older than her. It's disgusting. But she describes that she, starts getting all these accolades from other people in this MAGA circle because they're like, oh my God, like Elon likes you. Elon's commenting, Elon, blah, 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 blah. She gets added to some chat with people who also Elon engages with. And
Yeah, it's like proximity to power is helping ramp up her social power and social capital.
right. And she's very young. Like at this point, we're talking, she's in her early 20s. Okay. So if people can think back to what you were like then, I mean, I don't know what I would have done if the world's richest man were like commenting on my post. I cannot predict how I would have handled that. So I'm in no position to judge. Anyway, so then he starts DMing her and he wants to know when she's going to come to San Francisco. At this time, she's working for the Babylon Bee, and the person she works for had been trying to land an interview with Elon. So she
And what
says
is what is Babylon
the
Bee?
Babylon Bee is a right-wing parody site.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Oh, fake
So
news you can trust. That's their tagline.
yeah, right. Trust it as far as you can throw it. Anyway, so Elon is messaging her, when's she going to come to San Francisco? And they've never met, right? Like he's just commenting on our posts and stuff. And she goes, "Oh, well, we would come if you want to do that interview that my boss has been contacting you about." And then, according to her, he immediately then contacts her boss because she immediately gets a call from her boss saying, "Elon wants us to come to San Francisco. Let's go like in 2 days or something."
This is
Okay.
giving real Harvey Weinstein vibes too.
It very much, very much. It's disgusting. So then very quickly, she and her team are going out to San Francisco to do this interview. And then he gets her number. And that night, he texts her. I mean, she has screenshots of all these things. So he texts her and says, "Do you want to go to Providence, Rhode Island tonight?" And she's supposed to be like editing this interview and stuff. And she's like telling her team, "Okay, I guess I'm going to go to Providence." So they fly in his private plane to Rhode Island. And I mean, just imagine you're like, I think she was
Also,
22 or
what's
23.
in Rhode Island?
I don't know. That's where
I
he
mean, no
wanted to go.
shade on people from Rhode Island. I don't mean it like I just mean like why is he going to Rhode Island in the middle of it? Like, okay.
That's
Okay.
that's
Rhode Island.
where he wants to
Private
go.
plane. Okay.
And actually, okay, before I got carried away because I just think it's such a fascinating story. But I do have a clip that I want to show you or share with you um, about this period of time with the Babylon Bee and going to Rhode Island. So give me 1 second to pull it up.
Becomes like all encompassing. Mind you, simultaneously, I am working at the Babylon Bee where we're like scheduling this interview to do with Elon. Like our Slack channel for this project was literally called Elon Fest. Okay. So nonetheless, Elon, as I said, he ends up DMing me and he's like, "Are you ever in San Francisco?" And I'm like, "Actually, I'm supposed to be there whenever you get back to Seth, my boss, about an interview." Within like 30 seconds, Seth calls me and he's like, "Elon just got back to me about an interview date. Like, we need to book our flights to San Francisco right now." And I'm like, "Ooh, okay." Now, at this point, politically, Elon is like primarily talking about the free speech issue because he bought Twitter and, he's like dipping his toes in right wing slop. But so we go to San Francisco, we do this interview, and basically the whole time, like anytime Elon tells a joke, he's like looking to me to see my reaction. I also have like footage of him like checking me out while we were there. It was insane. Anyways, and I'm like 23, okay? And after the interview, I then get a text from Elon because at this point he had given me his number. And he is like, "Do you feel like going to Providence tonight?" Like, as in Rhode Island. So I am supposed to be cleaning up with my fellow coworkers from this interview. And I'm like, "Seth, I'm going to leave my phone on the table. I need you to look at it and I'm leaving. Like, I gotta go. I'm gonna go." Um, I was like, "Oh, a side quest! Yay, an adventure!" So right away, Elon is like, okay, well, wheels up at midnight, come to this like private airport. And I'm like, oh my God, what the fuck am I getting involved in? Like, am I about to be like Harvey Weinstein here? This is probably a bad idea, but I'm going to do it anyways. Okay. Like, at this point, I'm like, I'm going to do it for the plot. Okay. And so I,
Um, so this is the level of transparency that I'm talking about that she's giving. And you can see that she understandably was concerned. But then again, it's the world's richest man. It's this guy who's highly revered in her social circle. And he's like, do you want to come on my private jet and fly to Providence? And she's like, okay. I mean, she's 23. So anyway, she later on in this video talks about they do end up having coitus, as she calls it, on the plane. And he's asking her to pick a name for a baby. Now, people may know that Elon Musk and his father both believe that it's their responsibility to have as many children as possible because they're like such great people that they need to have, populate the planet. That will come back anyway. So, what I do want to point out here is that in this section where she talks about that, and I'm going to skip that clip because there's some other clips we want to talk about, but she describes how he just is constantly texting her, DMing her, calling her, and is very much love bombing,
Yeah.
coming from someone who's so much more powerful in so many different ways than she is. So, that's that part because a lot of people have questions about how she got together with Elon and and she does not, to be clear, she does not get pregnant at that time. It's months later that she gets pregnant, and it's a mutual decision that they decide to move forward on that path. Um, and then so she gets pregnant, and I want to share another short clip where she's talking about how his behavior changed after she got pregnant. So give me 1 second to get to the right spot on that.
womb so that we can increase our output of babies here. Like it was just weird to me. He also told me that I should get a C-section. Like what? Because it's better for the head and the brain size. What are you? No, I'm not signing myself up for a C-section. What? No, thank you. My portal works fine. Like
Her portal works fine, as she says. But
I
isn't
mean,
that
sure.
I mean, that was wacky to me, right? This guy who thinks that he's so smart and he thinks that delivering a child via C-section is going to impact the size of the child's brain, which is, just to be clear, absolutely not true. And also, she's again a young woman. She's like, why would I want to have surgery? Like C-sections are major surgery. Um, okay, so they have this relationship in the middle of somewhere in the middle of all this. He's also DMing another young woman asking if she wants to have his baby. That young woman reaches out to Ashley. I mean, it's like lots of weird and terrible things with Elon. Not surprising given everything that we know about him. But I think politically, the most kind of interesting things probably of what she's saying are one, the campaigns that I was talking about, and then the MAGA campaigns and how they're structured, and then also the election. So I know we're going to run a little bit long, but let me play for you a short clip on the MAGA campaigns and how they coordinate their messaging. Give me 1 second.
the paid campaigns because this is able to fester through many loopholes within our own regulations and laws. Because since what they're promoting is messaging or petitions or campaigns and not a service or a product, they do not have to disclose that they are paid for this on social media. So they have these Republican operatives, some of which were former White House, who build out these platforms that these right wing influencers can log onto and see active campaigns and sign up for and get paid for promoting certain messaging, certain initiatives, certain petitions. And this pay is typically, per click. Sometimes it's a flat rate, but it is everything from, hey, tell your audience to call their members of Congress and vote a particular way on this bill, or, have your followers sign this petition, promote this propaganda, XYZ. And the structure is indistinguishable from ad campaigns that you would do for traditional companies. So if you take, Tarte, for example, or a cosmetic brand or what have you, typically when they get influencers, they will also have a company copy or things that they should say, a script.
So, one more thing on this specific topic, and then we can talk about it. Because she goes on to explain. So, this is, by the way, one of the things she seems most concerned about from what I've seen from her videos is that we really need some reform so that this type of campaigning and advertising can't go on without people knowing that there's money exchanging hands. This is a major loophole that these right wing influencers are exploiting.
Well, and this is within
Go ahead.
a decade plus, well, more than a decade long thing within conservative politics of like the way that money from incredibly influential billionaires can be funneled through all of these sort of secretive pathways so that it doesn't need to be disclosed and it can really hide where that money's coming from and what it's trying to achieve. So
Right.
that sounds really on brand.
No, and she talks about that. I don't think I pulled that specific clip, but she talks about how the way that these things work is like there's these platforms, and as an influencer, you can go on the platform and look for like a task that you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
But and then you can get paid. You do get
Mm-hmm.
paid for that work, and then that money is not. You don't have to you don't have to disclose that on your post, and that money is never tracked to you because the only thing that's reported to the FEC is that the company that owns that platform got money from the PAC or whatever. So that's the only tracking that's done. But how that money then goes to the individuals is totally opaque, and that's a huge, huge problem. Okay, so one more clip on this specific topic.
They also have these group chats with members of the administration and high up officials that, especially when a scandal or controversy breaks out, all of this messaging is coordinated. Hey, here's how we respond to the files. Here's how we respond to the war. Here's how we respond to everything. So there's this entire ecosystem of large influencers. All of the largest influencers that you have seen in the right wing, 99% of them are paid or compensated or having their back scratched in one way or another. And then this trickles down because the people under them, these smaller influencers, are not aware of this. So when they're looking to these larger accounts in response to controversies or messaging, what they're seeing is actually very coordinated and very sophisticated influence campaigns from the top. There is no free thinking here whatsoever. They are waiting.
So that's a part that I think is really important because when we are consuming information online and we're seeing posts from various people, it can seem like it's organic. Like this is really this person's opinion, whether we agree with it or not. It can seem like that's their opinion. But not long after she posted that specific video, there was the White House Correspondents' Dinner shooting. And immediately that night, there were tons of posts from right wing influencers saying, see, obviously we need a ballroom. Like, how that's clearly like not a straight connection A to B. There's a shooting at a hotel. That means we need a ballroom. But once you know that this is all coordinated via some back end group chat, basically, and they may or may not have been paid for those specific posts, but they were at least given marching orders, then you start to understand why there were, it was a large number. She has them in a screenshot where she's like all these different people saying almost exactly the same thing. Like, if you still deny the need for a ballroom, then you are anti-American and, all sorts of things, but all about the ballroom. It was not about anything else. So I think that's really important for us to understand when we're taking in information and looking at what kind of prominent people are saying that a lot of them are being fed these talking points and being paid to say specific things in specific situations. So, carrying on from there, she then talks about, and this is the most uncomfortable that I've seen her in any of her clips, is when she starts to talk about the election, the 2024 presidential election. Now, if we go back to that time, Elon Musk was offering people like $1 million to go vote in the Midwest. He
Oh,
had
right.
already invested almost $300 million in the election. That's what we knew. But there were all these rumors, right, about the ballots. I mean, the voting boxes, like what was happening with those, and was any of his technology involved in any way? And there were things like, Trump said that he could never have won without Elon. There was a lot of things that just built suspicion that there had been some fraudulent activity.
Mhm.
Um, and so here's what she says about that.
That's okay. You can just find it.
And then October rolls around. And in October, Elon tells me that he is ready to release his, in his words, anomaly in the matrix. And I am like, oh, like, who's that? And he says that he has 10,000 lasers in space, referring to his satellites. I say, because I am like rather uncomfortable and I know the gravity of what he's trying to tell me right now, I say, wow, finally a focus on the Jewish vote. He keeps going and he says, this is not this is not a piece that they'll see on the chessboard. And I straight up tell him, I say, I would ask more, but I really don't want to be deposed. To which he says, very wise.
So there's that. And then fast forward. So she talks about the period prior to election night and information that Elon was privy to that she doesn't understand how he had access to, heavily implying that there was some election interference going on. And then we get to election night.
And then on election night itself, Elon, left Mar-a-Lago early. I was at Mar-a-Lago and he told me over text, he's like, yeah, I knew hours ago that no, Trump won. My team has the best real-time data anywhere. First of all, how the fuck do you have real-time data on elections? How do you have real-time data? I could not understand that. I don't know that I ever will. Uh, I I saw some shit, guys. Like, I saw some shit and I'm fighting really hard to keep my voice because I saw shit that impacts everyone. And if I was self-interested, I have been offered the self-interested deal to shut up and not talk about anything. But what I can tell you is I've not been offered certain deals just because I know that he's weird, okay?
So she elsewhere talks about having been offered roughly $40 million to sign an NDA. And what she's saying there is they're not offering me $40 million to stay quiet about a guy being weird. She's saying there's,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the things that she's seen. You've now heard a couple of her other clips where she's talking very confidently and very clearly. And this video, she has these pauses. She's very uncomfortable. Um, if people are watching this on video and you see the video, I mean, she is clearly uncomfortable and did not know how to handle that situation. Keep in mind, again, she's still very young, and that was 2 years ago. So she was even younger, having to deal with potentially hearing about election fraud from a guy who she had a baby with. And I'm not sharing that to, stoke the flames of conspiracy theories, but that is what he said. I mean, she went on Hassan Piker's stream last weekend and she hands him her phone. She goes to the iMessage app and he's scrolling and reading. Like, the words that she used are weird words because those are the words that Elon used in written communication, mind you. Like, this wasn't even like a face to face or a phone conversation. It was in text messages on iMessage. Um, and I don't know what that means, right? These space lasers, what his satellites have to do. I don't know how he would have how he would know hours before the election was called that Trump was the winner. That he had the so-called real-time data. Was it data that he was pulling out from the voting booths because he had hacked into them, or in other ways, or was it because he had data that he fed into the voting booths? I don't know, but it certainly seems like someone should be investigating all of that. I mean, he himself has said that he's owed a lot by Trump. I mean, anyway, there's lots of rhetoric if we wanted to get into that. Um, but again, back to what I said earlier, like, this is very risky for her to be saying this stuff. And so some people, for the people who are like, she's doing it for the clout or whatever, I mean, I don't think there's any
Oh,
amount of
man.
clout that is worth the risk that she is putting herself in, um, to say this.
There is no one scarier than a billionaire technocrat.
Who feels jilted, by the way.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, the first time that I became aware of Ashley St. Clair was actually a while back, maybe like 2 years ago or so, when she was posting on Twitter about their baby, um, and that he wasn't responding to her, so she was trying to get his attention on Twitter. Um, and Grimes has had to do that as well, by the way, tweet at him to get him to respond about their children. And then the last time, she does not go on Twitter anymore. They have lawsuits now. It's a whole thing. But um, the last thing that I remember seeing her having posted, because this people may be aware of this, was that she had co-authored a children's book that was transphobic. And I have not read the book. I don't know, exactly what was in the book, but she made a public apology. She removed her name from the book. She has said that she does not have the power to take it off the shelves, but she is no longer in any way attached to the book. She has apologized multiple times. And no one is forced to accept her apology. I'm just sharing that this is what she has said to address that specific issue. And she's also said that she read a lot after she decided that this movement was not well, let me back up and say that she also did not appreciate the way the movement treated women. And that was something that was very concerning to her, and that she has expressed privately to other people within MAGA her concerns for a long period of time. So there are people who she says can verify. But when she decided to separate from this movement, that she started reading a lot of the things that they had told her not to read, like Black writers and people who had written about slavery. I mean, really, that's what she
God
says. And
forbid you get educated. I mean, that's the thing, right? Is
right,
like all of this anti-education because when you
anti-intellectualism.
Mhm, mhm.
Anyway, so the very last thing I want to share is a short clip. So she's now, as you can imagine, getting a lot of invitations to go on various podcasts and talk about her experiences, how this happened, that she changed her views, and um, what she's up to now. By the way, she has resumed college and is trying to complete her degree and intends to go to law school so that she can try to address some of these legal issues due to around campaigns and financing. Um, okay, so this is the last clip that I want to show you. She went on the "I've Had It" podcast, which you and I are both aware of and fans of. At least to some extent. I can't say I've engaged with tons of their content, but the clips I've seen online have been very good. So she goes on their podcast, that was this week, and Jennifer Welch is asking her about the motivations of the people within MAGA. Like, what's their driving force? What's their deal, basically?
Racist is the movement.
It's pretty racist.
That's what I mean. I think it's just, would you say that's at the epicenter of it? And then also
I think
owning
it's
the libs?
becoming more and more at the epicenter of it. It wasn't so much before, but people like Stephen Miller have really, like, I've texts from Stephen Miller where he's like, "We need white boy."
What?
November." Oh yeah. He
You
used
have
to,
text from Stephen
he
Miller?
used to text me every day during the election.
How
He's like,
tall is
"Share
he?
this." I every time I've seen him, he's sitting down at the bar with a drink. So don't know.
But what would he text you? We need what?
He would ask for retweets during the election. Like,
Would you say white boy?
White Boy November. He's like, "We need the white boys. This is going to be White Boy November." Like, he's just a loser. And so, like, he's like, retweets. He's like, we need to get the
Wait,
men
hold
to
on.
vote.
So that guy is reaching out to you to
Oh,
reach.
yeah. To
Oh,
get the
it's just
white
they're
boys
all
to vote.
so insecure.
Losers.
Yeah,
They're
yeah. I mean, I
total,
knew
like,
that. I knew all of this.
that's why I don't care. I'm like, oh, who am I?
And how badly do they want to own the libs? Would you say that is the driving force, like the ethos that like bonds them together, owning the libs?
No, I think they're just hateful racists. Like, I think, like, no, I think that what bonds them together is hate and that they weren't cool in high school.
I mean, that's her, one woman's opinion, but that's based on her experience, again, for almost a decade of being part of MAGA politics. Um, and as Jennifer Welch says there, like, that's not surprising. I mean, we see, especially now when you look at what they've done with the Voting Rights Act and the with many different attacks on Black people, and healthcare, all sorts of things that they're doing that disproportionately affect, marginalized people in this country. Um, but yeah, that's where we find ourselves today, May 28th, 2026. That's so majority of, or a summary of, what we've learned from Ashley St. Clair's journey, in which she has, disclosed publicly. I think it's fascinating. It's very hard to go up against power like this. And is she making some money off her TikToks? I sure hope so. She has 2 children. And she does have this lawsuit. So if folks recall, in January, Grok, the AI chatbot on Twitter, was making, well, people were using it to make lots of inappropriate sexualized images of women and children, and she was one of the people who was abused in that way. And so she filed a lawsuit against XAI, because of that, and now they have a countersuit against her because they're petty like that. Um, and there are people on the right wing have accused her of making her 1-year-old child trans, and that Elon should have custody because of that, to prevent her from transitioning their 1-year-old, which is obviously absurd and just bigoted. Um, but yeah, that's the story. So I dare someone to tell me there's a more interesting story happening out there on the interwebs. I'm very curious what else she's going to share. She's obviously very smart and thoughtful, and has, just in case people are worried about her safety, she has stated multiple times that everything that she has is being held by someone other than her as well. All the evidence, all the screenshots, everything is not just living on her phone and in her head. She's made a couple videos about, people following her and her family and friends and intimidating folks, which I have no reason to doubt is happening. Um, so yeah, that's the gist of the Ashley St. Clair story as of today.
That was a lot.
I know, well, because she makes videos every day, and I'm summarizing a couple
Yeah.
minutes at least worth of videos for you, but, I
Yeah.
don't know, what's your reaction?
I mean, as I mentioned before, it's giving Weinstein vibes, so it was
Yeah.
interesting to hear her say the same thing. The other thing that it made me think about is, like, Henry VIII,
Mm,
where, like, he was just sort of cycling through women and, like, if you had the attention of the king and the money, and, like, I think to a degree, I mean, it sounds like she, certainly made some choices to spend time with Elon Musk. I I am really worried for her safety.
mhm.
Obviously, you just talked about that, and you and I both have to do a lot of things to keep ourselves safe, and we are like nobodies
Yeah,
comparatively speaking. We're like nobodies, um,
absolutely.
but we receive a lot of hateful messages, some of which are more pressing than others. So I am very curious to hear where she takes it after this. I really hope that she lives a long time to tell that
Mhm.
story. I was just thinking about there's a journalist I follow, Alyssa Valdez Rodriguez, who publishes a lot about the Epstein files and recently made some claims grounded in her investigative journalism work related to Epstein, and says that she believes she's been attacked by I feel like I'm going to use the wrong word, but like a digital weapon,
Mhm,
basically.
mhm,
And, now has to like suddenly move and has to
mhm.
change where she lives. And, it's incredibly disruptive for anybody who has the negative attention of these people with outrageous amounts of power and access. Um,
Yes, and we see what I've been thinking a lot about too as I've been watching her talk so openly about so much is the types of things she's talking about, we see in our workplaces. Like we
mhm,
see people who don't have Elon Musk power or wealth, but they are within this organization, or any organization, more powerful, have more status, have more influence, and can get away with such awful behavior because people know that if they say anything about it, they're the one who's most likely to get punished, not the person who's behaving badly. And we see this in all sorts of different bad behaviors. But it just made me think about the things that intimidate regular folks in our regular workplaces that we allow to continue because we won't speak up out of fear of retribution. And I'm not saying that's irrational, that's very rational. But then to see her say, you know what, it still matters. Like I'm still going to tell people the real truth here. It just has me thinking about whether there are ways that regular people, can find more courage in our
mhm.
workplaces. Because if it's one person, it's very hard. But if there's multiple people who come forward, then it becomes a different story. Anyway, I know we're very long, so I hope people enjoyed that conversation. I would love to hear people's thoughts on Ashley. If you find us on any platforms, let us know what you think. But with that, let's turn to our recommendations for folks. What's your take two and call me in the morning this week?
Well, as I already mentioned, Ronnie Chieng's commencement speech. I also found another commencement speech. I can't remember the person's name, but I'll put links to both of those in the show notes of them. It's the antithesis of the people who were, just praising the future of AI. And it's total opposite and it's hilarious. And Ronnie Chieng swears a lot, which I always love. Um,
Yeah,
the
he does
other
not pull any punches.
Yeah, well, I think the opening of his entire speech is "fuck AI,"
Yeah.
and and he says it many times. Um, the other thing, I didn't bring this up earlier, but because I was, doing a bunch of research around the Encyclical and all of that, and I like to go on YouTube and see kind of like who else is commenting on these things.
Mm,
And I was not aware. I will be honest with you, as someone who grew up around a lot of priests and nuns, I was
mm.
not aware of Catholic YouTube, to the
Oh.
degree of, like, um, sort of young I'm not gonna say good looking because I that's not for me, but, young men who are priests or brothers or whatever,
Mm,
who have these accounts where all they do is, like, explain Catholic doctrine and, like,
mm.
this is their, I presume, hobby in addition to whatever work they're doing otherwise for the church. Um But it was not something I had been familiar with. Some of them are very well produced.
Mm,
It's fascinating, and I don't get it, but I noticed it,
hmm.
and I was amused.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I don't spend any time on YouTube, so I have no idea what's happening there. But
Well,
I have something I'm going to say for next time. But one thing that I saw today that gave me a little chuckle is I don't know if folks have been following. RFK Jr. has been on an anti SSRI crusade.
ugh, yeah.
He recently said that we need to take SSRIs away from young women who go through this period of being crazy, and then we need to just let them go through it. Anyway, so these artists, Madeline Goetz and Olivia Piccini, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing those names correctly. They have a series of cartoons for The New Yorker about RFK Jr.'s approved list of SSRIs. So one of them is stop stressing, relax instead. That's an SSRI. Um, Sound baths, salt caves, red lights, and ice baths. That's an SSRI. Start skipping recommended inoculations. Anyway, I'll put a link to a carousel with that series in the
Hilarious.
show notes so that, yeah, we can all enjoy the nonsense that is our Secretary of Health and Human Services. And I think that's it for this week's episode. If you didn't like what you heard, this has been the Right Response podcast. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to The Present Illness, leave us a review or a rating, and tell other folks to check us out.
We know that you all are not into podcasts by right-wing nutjobs, so we know that you've enjoyed this. So please feel free to follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at The Present Illness, and you can stay on top of all of our TPI-related news.
We will be back next week with more headlines, hot takes, and doom scrolling, hopefully wrapped in some laughs.
Until then, agitate, hydrate, and take a nap. We will see you next time on The Present Illness. Production by Arghavan, Salles, and Alyssa Burgart. Editing by Alyssa Burgart. Social media by Arghavan, Salles. Original music by Joseph Uphoff. Don't take medical advice from random people on a podcast. This show is for informational purposes. It's meant to be fun, and it is certainly not medical advice. Please take your medical questions to a qualified professional. This podcast is our hobby, and it doesn't represent the opinions of our employers or anyone but ourselves.